Menachem. Very loyal friends.
Thank you. Okay, it says it's recording, so I guess that
I'm
means you're ready.
recording to my computer. I hope that's the right thing to do.
It says it's being recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you can mute everyone, I think you could automatically mute everyone. That stops from the background noise from coming in.
Yes, I'm afraid I will do that one by one because I don't want to mute you.
Okay, fine. So let me know when you're ready.
We can mute out.
Yeah, they can mute themselves.
Okay.
I think we're good. I think everyone's muted except for me, which I'm going to do now.
Okay, so that means you're ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much again, Rabbi Rabin, for this opportunity to come speak and to share some words, and hopefully we can use this as an opportunity once again to grow together as we've been doing till now. I just want to begin by giving a public shout out to, as we know, today's Veterans Day, a public thank you to all those who loyally risked their lives and did what they could to serve our country. I just want to thank you, and may God help you and help all of them with continued success for all the endeavors they do to try to help make the world a better place. And one more, just a request. I prefer to steer clear of politics and all the other issues, political issues and stuff going on in the world, obviously, as there's a lot to talk about, and it normally just results in a lot of people getting frustrated with each other. And obviously, our goal in life should be that we should become closer and try to do what we can to be friends. You know, as we know, it says in the Torah, actually, which means that thou shalt love their friend as they love themselves. Which now is not the time that we're going to go at length about this, but just as an idea of friends and trying to make peace between each other. And therefore, I'm going to request that we steer clear of all these areas that may cause a little frustration or other fighting. Also, one more thing before I begin, we're obviously, I don't know if you said it, this is going to be the topic, but I'm going to be speaking about growing from tragedy. And just before I begin, as we know, it's a very sensitive issue, and I spent many, many hours trying to work on it to make sure I could come across in a way where it could be acceptable to anyone, and it won't harm or hurt anyone's feelings or anyone in any way. But due to the sensitive nature of the issue, I apologize in advance if some of it is very hard and could hurt. And for me also, saying this over, it's really a very deep topic, obviously. And for me too, I hope that I could be able to, God should help me that I can make it through fully this speech. I just want to begin by saying over, a few weeks ago I received a phone call. And this phone call was letting me know about a car accident that took place. Okay. You hear of car accidents every few weeks, but unfortunately, this one resulted in the tragic death of my friend and classmate from school as a kid. And obviously, talking about such things is very difficult. But I just want to go back to that first feeling when I received the call. That moment of shock, of trauma, when the news hits you. That your friend, you will never see the smile on his face again. I'm never going to get that big, warm welcome as I walk into synagogue and I see him. It's a very, very hard thing to digest fully. And right away, you obviously struggle with the idea. Yeah, he's not going to be here, but could I still do something to help him? Could I help him now that he's moved on from this world? Maybe do another act of kindness to him? And furthermore, for myself, will I be able to move on in life, move on in the world without him? Will I be able to pick up from such a tragedy? 19 years old, and yet he's no longer here? It's a very, very difficult thing to comprehend and to pick yourself up from again. Not long after this happened, I was by the Boston Rebbe, and I told him over the story 2-3 days afterwards. And I asked him, why is it that we find that tragedy happens? And what are we supposed to get from tragedy when tragedy happens? And he told me an idea that's really one of the fundamentals of life. He told me that God creates tragedy for a reason. Now, obviously, we spoke about a mission last time. We'll come back to that. But the idea is that no matter what happens in the world, we could always grow from it. And everything that happens in this world is for us to grow and to become a stronger person. You know, this week's Torah portion is Parshat Chayei Sarah. And we read the story of Abraham and his son Isaac. And they went out to serve God. And on the death, and while out, Sarah, Abraham's wife, had a tragic death. And right away, the Torah tells us that Abraham, vayef, is the word used, meaning, and he cried. But for those who know the rules of studying the Torah, and they know the laws pertaining to writing a Torah scroll, know that each letter is supposed to be a certain size. There's an equal size written to each letter. Yet in this word telling us about the fact that he cried, one of the letters is smaller. Now, whenever this happens, it's in order to teach us something, to teach us a lesson, to teach us something we can gain from it. And the lesson over here is that yes, there's a time to cry, but at the same time, there's a time to move forwards. That yeah, although it's right, and it's the proper thing to do, is to go cry, you have to take that crying and use it as your opportunity to grow, to become a better and stronger person. Putting this aside for a second, let's go back to what we were saying before. We have to understand these two ideas when dealing with a tragedy, or in my case, the loss of a friend, or really in any case, a loss of one's parent, partner, child, or anything. And that is helping the person and helping yourself. Is there something more you could do for the loved one? And is there something you could do for yourself that you could gain from it? So let's begin by discussing what you could do for what a person could do for their loved one. You know, there was a Rabbi Leibel Katz of blessed memory, who I went to his class multiple times in camp. He used to have a class every day. A fascinating class on the Talmud, and really on a perspective, with a perspective on life as a whole. And he used to point out constantly something very interesting. The word Mishnah, referring to the book, the text written by the early sages, and the word Neshama, talking about the inner soul of a person, the spiritual soul that every person has inside of them, had the same letters in Hebrew, in the Hebrew spelling. And he wondered, what's the reason for this? Out of any word that could be used for both of them, is it coincidence that they ended up the same? And he said, no, there's a lesson we can learn from it. And the lesson is that what you could do to help out a person's soul is Mishnah. But it's not limited to Mishnah. By you studying or taking something upon yourself, doing an act of kindness, doing some sort of spiritual thing or some sort of thing in memory of the person who's no longer here, that uplifts the soul in heaven. And that helps him out. And that gives him a greater gift in the eternity. And gives him more merits as he goes into the world. Now, the other thing we have to focus on is the person himself. When tragedy strikes, it could be a turning point. You could use it to grow, or unfortunately, and hopefully this shouldn't happen, it could be a cause to sink. You could get depressed, or you could say, this will make me stronger. And the idea we have to realize is that no matter what happens, you have to use it to make us stronger. Last time we spoke together, we discussed the idea of people's missions in life. And we threw out the idea then of part of remaining happy. And part of the ways to making happy is realizing that everything comes from God. And not only does it come from God, it happens for a reason. And the reason is that this is part of your unique mission in life. Everyone has their unique mission in life. And when you have your mission, and you realize that it comes from God, and realize that everything that happens, including tragedy, is coming from God, and it's part of your mission to succeed, you could use that to help you grow. And in fact, many times it can make you into a stronger person. And not only will you grow as a person, you could use your loss to inspire many others. I read an article a few years ago about a person in Israel whose child became very sick. And this person went, and he was struggling throughout it. And then, unfortunately, tragedy struck, and his child passed on. A heartbroken father who lost his oldest child, something most dear to him. Heartbroken, down, depressed. He didn't know what to do. He went into, and I want to say it was the Belzer Rebbe in Israel. It could be I'm wrong with that. He went into his Rebbe, and he asked him, what am I supposed to do in such a circumstance? What should I do in such a situation? And with that, the Rebbe responded, know that it's from God. And God does not give a person a challenge that they cannot overcome. Part of a person's mission in life is that even when something is difficult, to overcome it and to use it to inspire others. And this person writes that when he focused on the fact that this loss came because of God, and it's there for a reason, he said, God chose me to be the one. And God gave me this special mission. And he went from there, and he writes that he went from there to create an organization to help out every single person that he knows of in Israel who lost a child. And anytime someone's there doing the traditional Shiva or suffers from a loss, he is always there to help the family recover and to help comfort the family so that they too can move on with life. You know, but obviously not every person has the ability, the time, or the skills to create an organization. But maybe the small little things could also make a difference. This past summer, unfortunately, there were many drownings in Israel. And I read an article in Mishpacha, one of the Orthodox Jewish magazines, about a person who was very close with one of these families who tragically lost a son. Brokenhearted, he went to go try to comfort the family by the Shiva. Yet, he says over, and it's written over there, he did not know what to do with himself walking in. What could he tell a family to help them comfort them by the loss? But as he walked in, he saw 3 people sitting there. And who were those 3 people? Each one of those 3 people were people who in the past 5, 6, 7, even 10 years were people who lost a child. And they felt someone else's suffering. And they said God gave them the mission. God made them go through it. It was part of their mission. So they can now go help others, that others too could recover and be comforted by it. You know, this is not really a new idea. It's not a modern idea that we find only in the 21st century. In fact, the Talmud in Tractate Brachot tells us, on page 5b, tells us about one of the great sages at the time, Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan used to walk around carrying a tooth of a child. A seemingly strange thing for anyone to walk around with, especially the great sage, Rabbi Yochanan. Shouldn't it be beneath his dignity to walk around with such a thing? And yet, the Talmud writes that any time tragedy would strike, someone will be down, someone will be depressed. Rabbi Yochanan will be the first one there. And he would tell everyone, you see this tooth? You know what it's from? This tooth is from the 10th child that I lost. And yet, I'm still here. And more than just being here, I'm using that to help inspire others. You know, we talk about tragedy It's obviously a very serious thing. And we right away think of death. But really, death is not the only type of tragedy. And it's not only about people who are losing lives. What about the people who never have the opportunity to bring life into the world? You know, there was a couple that were living, and for years and years, they didn't have any children. And they tried everything they could do. They went from one doctor to the next. Tried this therapy, this medicine, that medicine. No matter what they tried, they never got anywhere. After over 20 years of trying, they got up and they said, that's it. What still could we do? And they're ready to give up hope and to be depressed. And with that, the woman turned to her husband and said, no. Instead of us giving up, yes, we may not have children, but we could use the information we gain. We could use the skills, the knowledge, the contacts, and everything else that we gain to help out others in the same struggle with infertility. And she says from there, they began by helping out people who would call them up. And they would help connect them to doctors, get them the appointments, said maybe they could have a chance. I want to improve time for treatments. Instead of just throwing them under the table, they realized we're already doing so much, helping them doctors, helping them with knowledge. Why don't we start raising the money? Today, this organization called B'nai Olam has helped hundreds and hundreds of babies be born. Why? Because people took their suffering, their challenges, and they said, we could use that to inspire others and to help out others. You know, it's not only about personal tragedy. And life as a whole, and as we live through the particular time period we're living through, where tragedy strikes all over the world. We just lived through COVID, and before COVID, there was the Holocaust. And let's go back a little bit to the times of the Holocaust. And we could see some beautiful stories from the Holocaust of people who took the tragedy, the worldwide tragedy. The world was being destroyed around them, and yet they used it to connect closer and closer to God. There's a story with one of the great rabbis, Rabbi Meisels, from before the war. He was known as the Weitzner Rav, the rabbi from the city of Weizen. And as he came to the concentration camps, it came time for the holiday of Sukkot. Now, as we all know, when a person is in duress and in pain, they have no commandment at all. They're not expected to, and they're not obligated to go drive themselves crazy to go perform the mitzvah. Yet he decided that this is his opportunity, that amidst all the pain and all the suffering, he has this opportunity to do the mitzvah like never before. In the concentration camp that he was in, there lived a couple. And the couples were Jewish people who the government tried to help. Some were better, some were worse, in helping out the other Jews suffering from the plight of the Nazis. And this couple managed to get a hold of 2 full loaves of bread, unheard of at those times, in the middle of the war. And as he wasn't sure what to do about it, 2 loaves of bread, he was saving it for who knows when you'll need such a thing. Who knows when you won't get a meal anymore. And as he saved these loaves of bread, people found out about it. Well, he was holding on to it. This rabbi found out about the bread. And he sent a message to the couple saying he wants to speak with him. And he said, I want to ask you for a favor. Could I borrow your 2 loaves of bread? The couple said, Rabbi, you're nuts. He said, I want to borrow the 2 loaves of bread. He said, why? He said, you see, like this, I built a sukkah. Despite the circumstances around me, I was able to build one. And we know that there's a special thing that you're supposed to make, the blessing of Hamotzi, on a Friday night, on a holiday, on 2 loaves of bread. So I want to have this opportunity that despite everything around me, to do the mitzvah in the best way possible. Sit in the sukkah and make the blessing on 2 loaves of bread. The couple turned to him and said, on one condition. That is that I come with you. And the rabbi said, no, not a chance. You're exempt from the mitzvah. What are you doing? You're putting your life in danger for no reason. We're in the middle of a war. Families are getting killed. People getting killed. And yet you're going to put your life in danger for it? He said, I want to put my life in danger for it. So fine, they went to a sukkah built of bed frames with some boards on top. And they sat down and they made the kiddush. And they went and they ate the 2 loaves of bread. And that was the sukkah. They used the opportunity to go closer to God. But the story doesn't end. Years later, after the war, this rabbi moved to Chicago. And being one of the leading rabbis in the camps, many people used the opportunity while there. All the serious questions about Jewish law, they sent to him. And after the war, he put together a response of the horrifying, horrible questions that came his way throughout the war. We should never know such things. And as he was fundraising to go publish another book and another volume in his set of responsa, he flew to Israel to go do some fundraising. While there, a person who was hosting a parlor meeting in his house had a friend, not super religious, maybe was very modern Orthodox, if even Orthodox. It could be he just didn't affiliate. And he told him, there's a big rabbi coming from the States. Come listen to what he has to say. This rabbi got up to speak. And as he began this speech, he said over the story of that year where he sat in the sukkah in the most horrifying, horrible conditions in the Nazi concentration camps. And when he finished his speech, in the back, this person, this unaffiliated Jew, started crying. And he said, Ich bin der Kappel. I was that person who sat there in the sukkah with you all those years ago. And no, I'm not trying to take out of this story that after so many years, and after the crazy story in the concentration camps, they were reunited once more. That's not what I'm trying to take out. But there are 2 other, that's a beautiful lesson, but there's 2 other things we could take out. And that's the idea of number 1, that despite the crazy circumstances, and though he was not obligated to, and in no reason did he have to, the rabbi still went out of his way to make his sukkah, to come closer to God. He said, this time of tragedy, when the world's being destroyed around me, is my opportunity to grow and come closer to God. The second thing is that we see from the various volumes of responsa he published after the war, that even amid the most horrifying circumstances, the most horrible, horrendous circumstances, people still did what they could. And they still asked, what is the thing that God wants from me in these situations? And that's what we could take out. That despite the worldwide tragedy, as their families were getting killed, slaughtered before their eyes, as the people themselves starving, suffering, they did what they could. They said, what does God want from me in this opportunity? There's another story from the Holocaust of the Blue Jiva Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael Spira, one of the great Hasidic leaders before the war. And it was coming towards the end of the war, coming time for the last Pesach, Passover of the war. And he sat down before, and he asked the Nazis, can you do one favor for me before the war? The war is coming to a close. Do me one favor. Let me bake the matzahs that I could eat for Pesach. And surprisingly enough, they said, the Nazis, it's the end of the war, and they want the rest of the world to look kindly upon them. So they allow them to go bake the matzahs. Filled with happiness and gratitude, he began. And the entire camps, they got flour, they got water, and they started to bake matzahs. 2 days before the holiday began, someone published a letter in one of the big newspapers against the Nazi regime, saying what was actually going on in the concentration camps. Infuriated, the Nazis marched into the bakery and smashed every last matzah. As it came the holiday night, the Rebbe began to look around, and he found there were still 3 full matzahs left. And the question came out, who should be the one privileged to eat it? At first, everyone thought, let the holiest, the rabbis, the leaders, let them do it. And with that, a woman yelled out, no, Rabbi, it's about the kids. Because if they eat the matzah, they will live on for the future, and they will be able to tell their kids and their grandkids and the world after the war that despite the circumstances, despite what was going on in the world around us, we were able to eat matzah and do God's commandment and perform the mitzvah, even though, again, we weren't necessarily obligated to. And we didn't have to. We did what we could. So the Rebbe listened, and that's what happened. That night, the kids all sat down together and ate the matzah. After the war, which ended not long after, they gathered together in a DP camp, a displaced persons camp. And this woman went over to the Rebbe and she said, Rebbe, tell me, after all I've been through, I lost my family, I lost my husband, I lost everything. Please tell me, am I ready to move forwards with life? And the Rebbe said, yeah. And he said, I too lost my family and everything. My family, my friends, and everyone from home. And yeah, therefore I proposed to you. And the 2 of them got married. And that son of the woman who ate the matzah that night became the most recent Bluzer Rebbe who just nifter just a few years ago. Once again, what we have to take out of this is not the ideal of people risking their lives to do the mitzvah. Rather, the ideal that despite the extraneous circumstances and despite what's going on, these people still went and they said, what does God want from me? And what could I do to grow and to become a stronger person? And that I could keep living as a Jewish person after the war. You know, these are really not the only types of tragedies. I'm going to end off with one last thing, which is I heard during these times of Corona has become a big issue, which is why I really want to address it. And it seems like it's not a big tragedy like the others. It's not a death. It's not a worldwide destruction. This idea of people's homes breaking, of divorces. I recently read a book called Lifeline. And it's a book where people relate over life stories about themselves and how they overcame various challenges in life. A very emotional book, as you could say. And in there was a kid was describing what it was like to be raised under split custody. A heartrending, horrible story pierces the heart about such things. Yet, he writes there how he used to have to split from house to house, 2 nights here, 2 nights here, 3 days here, this Shabbat here, this Shabbat there, and how complicated it is. But he writes that at first, as the confusion overtook him, he didn't know what hit him. And it was extremely challenging. Yet he said, I took that to mean that instead of me being stuck with 2 parents, I'm privileged to have 4 parents. And instead of having only 4 grandparents, I have 8 grandparents. Now this seems like insanity. A child of a broken home, as many people say, these people won't necessarily get any more in their lives. Yet, this kid said, no, I'm going to show you what's right, and that's going to make me a better person. That I have this privilege of being the one with multiple parents. And as an aftershot note to that story, someone else wrote another story in. And he writes that he divorced when he was married, youngly married, with 4 kids. And he said he knew other people at the times who went through divorces. And yet when they went through it, they put up a fight for as much as possible. He said, instead of him fighting, he'll give in to whatever the other side wants. Because what matters is not about himself, even though he wants to spend the time with the kids. It's how could they be raised in a healthy environment without the fighting and the constant bickering. And that's what happened. And he writes because of that, he remained in ongoing good relationship with everyone involved. And he said, because of this, and he managed to come out happy out of the entire thing. Many people in the community have since turned to him to ask him for advice, how to deal with their challenges and their struggles and what they're suffering through. And he says it's only because he went through. He was able to grow and use that to help out others. And I just want to end off with one last line from the movie, or TV series, I think is what it was, Rocky. And this line really sums up what we've been saying till now and sums up the entire lesson of what it is that we're speaking about. And that is, life is not about how much you hit, or rather about how much you get hit and can get back up again. And we see that's really what life is. Life is about, yes, there's tragedy, there's whatever else. But the idea is to grow and to take that further. It's an opportunity given to you by God for you to become a stronger person, for you to help those around you, and for you to take it to inspire others. Thank you.
Thank
Rabbi
you, Menachem.
Rabin, any questions?
A bunch of people have joined us since you started, both from my synagogue as well as on the phone. And I see some clapping. I obviously can't see those on the phone. One correction, Rocky is a movie.
Rocky's a movie,
Although there were
okay.
several.
I think it was several movies came out
It
of
was
it, though.
several movies. Yeah, I think there were like 3 or 4 of them. So it was like a series. But I want to open it up. I think you said you'd be happy to answer any questions or challenges or
Yeah.
whatever that people might have to share. So if anyone either on the phone, again, if you're on the phone, just do *6 and you should be able to get off mute. Or if you're on the screen, just, and I think everyone knows how to unmute themselves who's on the screen. Any questions, comments, reactions, want to share anything?
We have anything? Yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah, hello?
Thank you so much. I think most of us are old, and we've gone through most of us have had challenges in our lives, and we have learned to to be knocked down and to get up again, because that's what you have to do, because there's not much else you can do. And so you just do it. But it's good to be reminded of it, and I thank you for that.
You're welcome. Now, just a comment on that. Obviously, that is, as you were saying, that really is what life is. Life is about, you get challenges and taking them to grow again. But if a person could look at it and it's very difficult to do so and understand, then instead of it being that you're forced to get back up again, that it's a privilege that we have to get back up again, you can make the challenge so much more meaningful and personal. I don't know if you agree to that or not. I'm throwing out the ideal.
Sure. Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Anybody else? And it's okay if you disagree with something or have a question. Or...
Yeah, I'm open to hearing different opinions on things or questions and related.
Go ahead, Moshe. And then Ellen.
So I had, I don't want to say tragedies, different things has happened to me. And 6 years ago, I fell at work and broke my ankle. And I haven't been right since, but Gam said Latova, this too is for the best. While I was in the hospital, they found out that I had AFib, that I was a walking time bomb. So when something bad happens, something always good happens out of it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. That really is a very special, it's a very special thing on personal. I'm saying that it's a personal story that you're bringing out that could really relate to the idea. And we mentioned Gamzula Tova last time, and while you said this story, it reminded me of something I was once studying about. There's something called Saras, which is, I forgot the English name for it, but it's an illness that was given at certain times when God felt the need to punish someone. Sorry. And one of the things that we find many stories of in the Talmud and in the other midrashic books and the other interesting ancient Jewish texts is that many times what happened was God would put this disease or whatever you want to call it on the house, which would require they knock down those walls. And they would knock down and they'd find treasure, buried treasure hidden inside their walls. So as you said, anytime something bad happens, Gamzu Tova, and something good will come out of it.
And Ellen, did you want to share something?
Yes, I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss of your friend. And sometimes people can't get up and they're not strong enough, but we can help others that cannot get up for themselves. And one other point, sometimes things happen and, like in a car accident, and it's a driver that's intoxicated or whatever, and it's not really, I believe it's not really the way things should have happened. So we can adapt to that and try to move forward and help the situation so that it doesn't happen again, whatever it is. That's all.
Thank you so much for those suggestions. I want to point out this idea that you're speaking of intoxicated driving. Intoxication, as well as high due to overdose and overuse of drug substances, is unfortunately a very big issue that we find currently in the world as a whole. Now, we're obviously not here to discuss the best way to stop it, but it's an idea that everyone should hopefully instill within their kids and instill in the future generations. The idea that although it may seem fun and may look very cool, or whatever the circumstances may be, these things are dangerous, and yes, they cause harm. And unfortunately, and many times, they could cause death. I was speaking to a person once, and he's telling me that he had two friends who unfortunately overdosed. And he said the shock it hit him with was it gave him that sudden burst of what's life all about. And many times when we hear of these things, and they're difficult, yeah, and we should do whatever we can to stop it, when we hear of such tragedy and such problems taking place, not only should we try to help out everyone else, we should do some thinking ourselves. What's life all about? What am I doing here for? And we could use that also as an opportunity that maybe we could grow from the incident.
I don't think everybody is capable of that, of coming through this. Some people just can't accept the tragedy, and it's really sad.
100%. But that's why the idea of friends come in. If it would be an idea if everyone was a selfish person, we would never get anyone in life. In fact, I once heard a very interesting saying said over from the early sages. I believe it's from the Talmud, but I don't remember off the top of my head. That the world was created with givers and takers. And we find an interesting commandment in the Torah called tzedakah. You have to give charity. Now, charity is obviously a great thing. But in the perfect world, why did God have to create beggars and poor people? Why couldn't God create a world where everyone was equal? Everyone has money. And therefore, no one would have to rely on the charitable donations of others. which is really an eye-opening question to what is charity all about? And this is really gives us an understanding in what the world was created for. The world was created with givers and takers. And that although we should all strive to be the givers, there are times where we're stuck being a taker. But even at the times where we are stuck being a taker, we could still use what we have to help others. So if a person has to be a taker with money, they could help out someone else. In fact, the Talmud says, what's the greatest type of charity a person could do? The greatest type of charity a person could do is to give someone a smile. You know, there's a story said over about a man who was getting depressed. Things weren't going well at home. He had no money. He's in heavy debts. He just lost his job. Stuck, not sure what to do with himself. He was walking the streets of Manhattan late one night, contemplating, should he do the worst and give up? And as he walked, he bumped into a person who gave him a big warm smile and asked him, why do you look so down? And the person said back, I lost my job. Things are about to break up at home. I have no money. I have crazy debts. I don't know what to do with myself. The person said, let me tell you something. My name is Warren Buffett. And you see those buildings around there? And that building and that building, I own it all. And let's make a deal right now. I will lend you $1 million to be returned 1 year from today. Tell me your account, I will wire it over. So, what happened? The man went home, suddenly happier than ever. He finally has money, for a year. But at least now he can pay up the debts. He can find a new job. He has something to live off of for stability. And as the story goes on, he became very successful in that year. And he became a very happy person. This person who before was depressed and down is now the happiest person around. The year passed and it came that night. And he walks back to that place in Manhattan late at night. And now he's a different person than who stood there the year before. A self-confident, happy, wealthy person. And he began looking for that man in the white suit who he met 1 year earlier. And he's there for a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, and he's waiting. Then 2 people walk over and approach him. And they turn to him, they say, we're the wardens in an insane asylum. And there's a person who's been seen walking around wearing a white suit. He calls himself Warren Buffett. And in fact, he escapes very often. And I think the last time he escaped was 1 year to today. And with that, the person, shocked with realization, it came to him. He never got the $1 million. But when a person is happy, that's the key to success in life. When a person is happy, he could turn himself around. And if a person approaches the challenges and approaches the stuff that comes his way with happiness, he will be successful. Hello, any more questions?
I just want
Comments?
I want to share, and I'm curious your reaction. I quoted this in my class yesterday, just a small part, but now I actually found it so I can quote the whole thing. I don't know if you've heard of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who just passed away.
Of course, yeah.
So I had heard him, in an interview they played on NPR the other day, and I just found it. And he was asked, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And his response was, God does not want us to understand. Because if we understand, we'd be forced to accept that bad things happen to good people. And God doesn't want us to accept those bad things. He wants us not to understand so that we'll fight against the bad and the injustices of this world. And that's why there's no answer to that question. God has arranged that we shall never have an answer to it. And I was just curious if you had any, thoughts on that.
Yes, I have two comments to make about it. Number one is someone once went in to the Boston Rebbe, and I know the story happened with many of the other great Hasidic leaders. And he starts complaining about all the bad and asked him what to do and all the bad. And how does the rabbi deal with all the bad stuff that happened to him? The Rebbe looked at him shocked. Bad stuff that happened? Everything's good. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, this story happens with many people, and it's happened many times with many of the great rabbis. But number one is that if you look at everything as good, everything comes out to be good. And the second thing is, I was one time assisting the home assistant at an old, very sick, dying rabbi. They called him the Tinkeroof, Rabbi Moshe Aaron Friedman of blessed memory, a very special person. And to talk about a person, first of all, who overcome with challenges. He was sick, paralyzed from waist down. The only thing he felt was pain, pain, and more pain. Covered with infections, he couldn't move. He couldn't lift himself in his chair to shift his position. He could do nothing. And one night, people asked me, could you do it for a learning experience to go be his home assistant? So I accepted the offer as an older rabbi, a venerated rabbi like this. You never know what you could take out of it. And while there, I was there. And the question came my way. A friend of mine texted me that question. Why do bad things happen to good people? And why do bad things happen to good people? And right away, we all know, the Talmud in Tractate Brachot says this. It lists off several possibilities. And then it says, after several possibilities, there's no answer to the question. And I said this to this rabbi, and he said to me, it's true that the Talmud says there's no answer. Yet I could show you in so many different texts, so many different answers. And that's why the bigger question is, why is there no answer? And he said it's too long of a thing to discuss. And unfortunately, before I could get the full answer out of him, he passed away. Several weeks after that time, he passed away. But maybe it's an idea like we're saying, that if a person looks at everything as if it's for the good, then maybe there's no bad anymore. It's all good. So when bad things are happening to good people, maybe that's it. If we look at everything as if it's good, and we accept it as this is the will of God and this is what God wants from us, and it's for the best, then yeah, it really is good. And the other idea I heard about it is that many times we discuss bad things happening, good things happening to bad people. And people always wonder, how is it and how could it be that bad people get so much good? And with that, they answer, and this is another idea thrown out about the topic. As we know from the Kabbalistic sources, and really we find the source to everything in the Torah, that there's a prayer that we say called the Shema. And in the second paragraph of the Shema prayer, it says over the idea of reward and punishment. When people do the right thing, in the next world, they receive reward. But if they do the wrong thing, they can get punished. And maybe that's the ideal. That even while we sit here in this world and we see good things are happening to bad people, maybe the reason is so that way they'll get the reward now. So it comes to the next world, they won't get the reward. And maybe the good things happening, the bad things happening to the good people because the opposite. That God is saving the good so that, yeah, when they go to the next world, they can get so much more reward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to?
I have a question.
Okay.
It's going on in my mind that I know several people with mental illness, and they are caught up in something that they can't get out of. And it's hard for even other people to help them to get out of that. We talk about professional help, but basically, many poor people don't get the kind of professional help they need. I would love to see how I could encourage someone who finds himself or herself devastated by the mental illness. I don't know what I'm quite asking, but whether or not they can, rise above it, or is it a question of whether I can rise to the occasion and help them? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's obviously a very difficult discussion, and it's obviously a very difficult topic, discussing people with mental illness, because to date, there aren't necessarily any treatments fully to mental illness. Though I saw a story brought down of a man who, a newlywed husband, married a wife, and it's the dream marriage. And there's one thing about his wife that every day she used to do. She was European, and she had her tea time every afternoon. And every afternoon, as she sat down to tea, she didn't just make a simple tea. She used to make a complex, fancy tea with everything down to the type of water and the type of tea bag, how much sugar. One day, as he watched her make her tea, he saw that instead of her making the tea with the whole fancy way she normally did, she just went straight to the sink. And when he asked her about it, she said, "What do you mean this is how I do my tea?" He took her to doctors, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I believe it's Alzheimer's. Maybe it's dementia, I don't remember. Whichever the case was, he realized that his wife is beginning to lose it. And for him, he had been married for over 30 years at that time, and was heartbroken to see such a thing happen to his wife. Devastated, not sure what to do. And he decided that the way that he's going to approach it is to view it that he was privileged to spend 30 years with her. That although they spent 30 years together, living as one, and now it's his opportunity to give back. And although, yes, it's a struggle, and his wife is not who she once was, he could do what he could to help her out, to make her even the closest remnant to what she used to be. And yeah, although she's not the same, he realized this is part of his mission in life. And it's devastating, it's painful. And especially knowing that many times there is no cure and nothing they could do. Still, the idea is for the caretaker to come in and to realize that even at times where things seem painful and there's nothing you could do to help the person, part of your mission is that you could grow from it and that you could still approach it in a way of giving back and saying thank you for all those years we spent together. Does that answer your question?
It gives me some hope.
The other idea, obviously, they could do, and I'll throw this out also, and no, I'm not promising miracles over here, but we have the idea of prayers and to pray to God. That although physically things may seem impossible, and according to the natural world, things are impossible, there's an idea of prayer which is supernatural. And God runs the world in a way where, yes, he created normalcy, but there's also something called supernatural. And since God is almighty and can do anything and he can do everything, there's an idea that if a person prays out to God, and it doesn't have to just be at the times of prayers. We spoke a few times ago together about hitzbo dedo. The idea of one speaking to God, no matter where they are, when they are. But you can speak out your pains, your frustrations, and your hopes to God. And ask God to help you. And although it may not seem like a person's spouse, a person's relative, whatever the case may be, is getting any better, the thing that does come out, though, is that they can build a closer connection to God. And they could see it that way. And many times, we do have these challenges. And I really heard a great quote, which is an inspiration to go further in life. From the African-American great educator Booker T. Washington, I've learned that success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles overcome while trying to succeed. That though it may seem difficult and it may seem like there's no hope, that itself is the biggest proof of a person's success. And a person could use this struggle to build up his connection or her connection to God. Speak to God. God knows every language. God, the creator of the world, created everything. Speak to him. Throw out your pains. Throw out your feelings. And ask him to help you. And even if it doesn't seem like there's help, do not worry. God is listening. He's the Father that will always listen to the Son, no matter the circumstance.
Menachem, are you really only 19 years old?
I'm really only 19 years old. Yes.
You're wise beyond your years. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Menachem, thank you very, very much. It looks like some of your friends I'm assuming they had to go to their next shiur because some of them had to leave. We have one last question if you have time. I don't know. Do you have another
Oh, sure.
moment?
I have time. No, I've had some more time. Yeah.
I know you've mentioned about the world to come. Could you talk about this, what you think is in the next world, or what you, could you speak a little bit more about this? What the next
I could
world
tell you
is
like this. I could tell you like this, and that is, the world to come is something that's supernatural, spiritual, and beyond our physical understanding. Beyond what it is that we can comprehend being a physical being. What I could tell you is like this. Take the biggest pleasure in this world. Whatever it is that you find the most enjoyable thing to do. If it's the Sunday afternoon football game with your family while sitting back and enjoying a nice cold drink, or if it's your dream vacation, I do know it'll be 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times greater than that. That though we can't necessarily understand it due to our physical things, it'll be a spiritual and supernatural and amazing pleasure. It'll just be pure pleasure, whatever it is that means. But it's something that will not only be to our physical bodies, but even to the inner soul of a person. It will get the pleasure. Does that help at all?
I was curious of your interpretation. I thank you for answering the question.
You have what?
Well, Menachem, thank you so much as always, and I hope you will join us again. It was a pleasure to have you and so many of your friends who came on after you had started. So I'll figure out later today how to get the recording if anyone missed part or wasn't able to be here, that they can share as well. And just thank you very much on behalf of all of us that had the pleasure of learning from you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. If there are any more questions, I'll take more.
Thank you so much for everything. It was very worthwhile listening to you.
Yeah.
And have a wonderful day, and we look forward to learning from you again.
Thank you so much.